Hello, everyone. Namaskar, Adab. Welcome to Triveni Media UK's The Magic in You with Shonali. I'm Shonali Datta, and I will take you on a very different journey in this hour where we are going to have a conversation on some not so talked about geopolitical, demographic, and social issues related to Southeast Asia, as particularly the Northeast India, the region I come from, and where our guest today comes from too. Triveni Media is a platform with a purpose, and our values are to empower, inspire, and entertain. I would like to thank all those who supported our fundraising efforts through our Just Giving page for the children of the Harvi slum, Mumbai. We endeavor to bring guests on our platform who contribute to our world through their work, inform us, educate us, and make a positive difference. Well, everyone, we are in the other half of November. The air is getting colder by the day, but warmer by the festive essence of Christmas approaching. That's what I love absolutely about this time of the year. Those in UK, if you've not visited London, please do. It's buzzing with Christmas markets, amazing lights, decorations, Regent Street, Carnaby Street, Oxford Street, Covent Garden, the markets, the Christmas markets at Leicester Square, Trafalgar Square, along Thames in the South Bank, absolutely vibrant and sparkling. So please do visit if you happen to make some plans. Well, today we have someone very special joining us from another corner of the world. And I'm so excited and honored to have him on Triveni. He's an author and journalist and a former editor of daily newspapers in India's major metropolises, Delhi, Mumbai, Bengaluru. He currently lives in Kolkata and writes op-eds, short for opposite the editorial page, analysis, and occasionally does reporting on India for a number of national and international publications. He is also a dear friend of mine. Let's welcome Samrat Choudhury.
Hi.
Hi, Samrat. How are you?
Hi, Sonali. Thank you. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks for having me on your show.
Absolutely my pleasure. I mean, I've been planning this for a long time, but something or the other, I mean, everyone's busy. But I'm so thankful to you to have accepted the invitation, to have made this time for us, really. Thanks for coming. So, yeah, so you are joining us from Philippines, aren't you?
Yes, I am right now in a place called Bataan, which is across the Bay of Manila, the other side of the Manila Bay. And as you know, we have an 8-hour time difference with London. And
Yeah.
your introduction of how it is in London actually made me nostalgic from my brief time there, remembering Regent Street and the areas around.
Yeah. It's yeah, two different kinds of I mean from two different parts of the world. So obviously the feel is different. Yeah, London, UK is all about Christmas now, so can't wait. I mean,
So is
actually,
it here.
oh,
It's
is
the
it?
same in the Philippines. Yes,
Oh,
a
okay.
very different weather, but a very different climate. But yeah,
So, yeah, welcome to the Magic in You. And it's so amazing. It's an amazing feeling to share this platform with you, and also feeling a bit strange to meet you virtually, as we've always met face to face, even if they've been like few and far between the last few years. And yeah, we do share a common history of growing up in Shillong, India, and our friendship goes way back to our college days, those wonderful teenage days when life was so carefree and simple. And we've all come a long way since. And so before we start the conversation about your work and your journey, let me fill in our viewers a little bit more about you. So, viewers, Samrat's latest book, The Braided River, A Journey Along the Brahmaputra, was published by HarperCollins in 2021. He has earlier authored a novel, The Urban Jungle, which was published by Penguin and nominated for the Man Asian Literary Prize. He also co-edited an anthology titled Insider Outsider on this issue related to Northeast India. His other projects include Partition Studies Quarterly, an online journal focused on the forgotten causes and experiences of the partition of India in its northeast. Samrat was the Asian Leadership Fellow from India at the International House of Japan in Tokyo in 2018 and a Chevening Scholar at the University of Westminster, London in 2019. Wow, Samrat, let me gather and absorb all that. What an incredible series of work you have turned out, and what brilliant accomplishments. Really, truly great. And today we are also going to get a glimpse of that magic in you. Uh, so, please tell us about your latest work, your book, The Braided River.
Well, it's a travelogue, and so it's basically a sort of a long journey, or rather a sequence of longish journeys that I undertook from following the Brahmaputra River from the disputed border between India and China, the McMahon line, down through Arunachal Pradesh, which, as you know, is uh, claimed by China in more or less its entirety, and through Assam down to Bangladesh. And I ended my journey at the confluence of the Ganga and the Brahmaputra in Bangladesh. Very few people seem to remember that the Ganga and the Brahmaputra actually do meet. And so this was the
I
sort
didn't
of
know
this.
myself. I read
Yeah,
up,
so,
I read up, and then I was like quite
yeah,
amazed to know that.
so it's a, it's a, what shall I say? So basically, it's a travelogue, but
Mm,
uh, it's also a travelogue informed by the uh, histories and also some of the current issues that uh, animate uh, political life in the
mm,
places that I passed through. So while the book is essentially a journey, it is also a journey through, in some ways, certain issues, such as, for example, the India China border dispute at one end,
mm,
the issue of alleged illegal migration from Bangladesh into Assam, which has
mm,
been a factor in the politics of India for a very long time, and especially of Northeast India, as you know. Um, that's at the other end, that's at the border with Bangladesh. So these are just a
mm.
couple of the issues that I touch upon in the book,
Yeah.
while also generally enjoying myself and enjoying the journey.
Wow. So you literally traveled along the Brahmaputra, went to these different places, met people, had the first-hand experience of how it is to, uh, how it is for the people over there along the river. And
Yeah,
so must have been a very, engrossing, absorbing journey for you. And also you may have come across challenges.
yeah. So basically, I think uh, to talk generally about travel, uh, there are different kinds of travelers. I still remember these two very good friends of mine who wanted to go many years ago to Japan. And before they went, they looked at things in such detail that they had already seen places in Google Street View before they even went there. So I wondered why they went. They could have saved themselves the trouble of actually going there, since they had already mapped it all down to Street View. So my way of traveling was very different, and I did minimal research before going, and
Mm,
just
wow.
just went. And I think fittingly for a book about a river, I decided to go with the flow. So my friend Akshay Mahajan, friend and photographer, excellent photographer, he took a lot of beautiful photographs which are there in the book.
Mm,
So the two of us just took off, and once we passed Assam, entered Arunachal, and went up into the hills of Arunachal beyond Pasighat,
mhm.
we had no signal on our mobile phones. So for the rest of the journey, we were completely cut off, and we just went, and we had no bookings. We didn't know where we were staying, how we were going. We just went, and that was it.
Literally going with the flow.
Yeah.
Wow, wow. Yeah, I think these days, because of technology, we can get into that mode where we are over prepared when we go into a
Mm.
place. But I think I'm also a bit like you, where I just go with the flow, and I like to, yeah, go to a place and see what the place has to offer and make plans, there and then,
Uh-huh.
because we go there and then the things appear, and then we
Yeah.
kind of, yeah, assimilate what is there. And yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's a nice way to kind of, yeah, to get a fresh eye into your work, into
Yeah.
what, yeah.
Yeah, it allows for serendipity and discovery. And of course, in my case, because I was working on a book and because I was touching upon serious issues in the book, I had to do a lot of research, but I did the
Mm-hmm.
research later. So I allowed myself to see the place with fresh eyes and
Mm-hmm.
without a lot of preconceived notions as far as possible, to just go and experience the place first. And I just kept my notes. I made it a point to keep detailed daily notes.
Yeah.
And then when I went back is when I started doing the research. And then I did an enormous amount of research. I read a
Mm,
lot of books. I really studied things in detail.
yeah.
But that was after going back.
Brilliant. And what was the furthest point you could go to physically?
Well, so there's this place called Gelling, which is the last village on the Indian side,
Hmm.
going up the Siang Valley. The Siang is what is the name of the river, which is known as Sangpo in Tibet. And
Hmm.
when it enters Arunachal, it becomes the Siang. And the
Right.
Siang later is sometimes called the Dihang. And when it enters Assam, it merges with the Lohit and the
Mm,
Dibang, and these three together form the Brahmaputra. These are the three major tributaries which come together to form the Brahmaputra in Upper
yeah.
Assam,
Right.
off Pasighat. So
Right.
basically, I reached the uh, village of Gelling. Akshay and I reached the village of Gelling, and we were
Mm,
stopped on the outskirts by the Indian army and confined to a corner of the road with an impressive array of military might surrounding us. A lot of soldiers with, large soldiers, strapping soldiers, fully armed, and we were questioned. And
mm,
then we had got there on the back of a dumper truck, which was transporting sand and cement to build a Tibetan monastery, a Buddhist monastery. And so then we were put back onto the truck and sent packing.
okay. Okay. So you could go further than that. Right.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Oh,
the McMahon line is visible from there. So basically, the village is I mean, the hill in front, and I can't be sure about the distance, but it's just right in front. It must be less than a kilometer probably is the McMahon line. So we got within that distance. Of course, it's
yeah.
not a straight line. I mean, at some points it's close, some points it's further away, but at the closest point it's less than a kilometer.
Wow. I mean, the journey of Brahmaputra itself. I mean, before I read your book, I hadn't known how it started, the source. We all know it comes from somewhere, but
Mhm.
never really took an interest. We always went to Assam, um, went to the Brahmaputra on boat rides and all that, but never really went further than that in terms of interest as to where it comes from, how it comes, and things like that. But when I was looking at the path of the Brahmaputra, it's like amazing how it starts from almost from the Mount Kailash,
Yes.
goes down towards east. It travels a long, long way, and then
Yeah,
it's like from the other end of the Himalayas, isn't it?
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
comes down to India, and then ends in Bangladesh
yeah,
with
yeah,
Ganga. Wow.
yeah, yeah. Uh, there
Amazing.
is, yeah, there is this, there's a lot of political tension, geopolitical tension about the issue of water
Mm,
security.
yeah,
And because a lot of rivers start in Tibet, very major rivers start in Tibet.
yeah.
Uh, Brahmaputra is only one of them, the Indus is another, and
Mm,
there are more. Uh, so basically, uh, Tibet is often called the water tower of Asia, and the Chinese presence there is viewed with a lot of concern by downstream countries. But I would like to make a clarification on this point, which is that the Brahmaputra is not the same as the Sangpo, which is the river in Tibet,
Hmm.
because so many tributaries join it on the Indian side of the border.
Right.
Tibet, you must remember, is a lot like Ladakh in the sense that it is high altitude, cold desert. It
Hmm.
is dry. So
Hmm.
most of the water is actually from the southern face of the Himalayas. The
Right.
clouds go in from the Bay of Bengal and the rain falls on our side of the border. That is why Arunachal is so lush green.
Yeah.
Most of the
Yeah.
water is actually from the southern aspect. And
Yeah.
so the Sangpo is not a very big river. The Brahmaputra is vast. The
Hmm.
Brahmaputra
Right.
in monsoon can be 16, 17, 18 kilometers across. And even the Siang, I didn't see the Sangpo with my own eyes, but I did follow the Siang all the way up.
Hmm.
It's barely a kilometer across. So it's much
Right.
smaller.
Okay, okay. That's very interesting to know. And yeah, I mean, in geography in school, we did read about the leeward and the windward side.
Yeah,
So India is in the fortunate side of that.
yeah. We are on the right side of it as far as having the water is concerned. Yeah,
Okay. Oh, that's nice to know. I mean, that the fear is less than that, it is joined by other tributaries from the Indian side.
yeah,
Of course, a lot of power is there politically for things to, for countries to take control of other countries' welfare, if I am putting it in a right way. Um, but yeah, hopefully humanity will prevail above all these political differences.
absolutely.
Thanks for that. And again, the other thing which I actually came into, I was reflecting on is that how rivers don't, they transcend boundaries, that they came all the way from China to India to Bangladesh. It's the same river, and a river knows no boundaries, isn't it? It washes the feet of all. So that's nice. So it I think more than the political thing of your book, the demographic, it's that aspect as well, which reminds us that everything in whatever we experience is all one. We are all together in it. So I've got some footage of your book as you were talking. I should have shown this to our viewers. So this is the Braided River cover picture of Samrat's book, and I've got some brilliant reviews by the very famous people. Wow. Reviewed by none other than Shashi Tharoor. It's like absolutely brilliant.
That was a cover blurb. Uh, yeah, it was very kind of Dr. Tharoor to sort of give that cover blurb.
And well deserved.
Thank you.
So I did read your first book, the novel Urban Jungle. Very witty, smartly written. I superimposing Kipling's Jungle Book on a contemporary urban setting. So how did that book happen? Where did you get the idea from?
Well, uh, I mean, that was a novel, very different from my subsequent uh, authored and edited books. The authored book is The Braided River, which you just showed, and I have edited a couple of others.
Hmm.
Um, so that was a novel, and I had always thought that the quintessential Indian story, even now, I would say, the most one of the most enduring modern stories uh, on or set in or about India is definitely Kipling's Jungle Books. Kipling was a very problematic character in many ways. He was a product of his time. He was brilliant, but he was also an arch imperialist, and
Mm,
he's the man whose poems, among others, include The White Man's Burden.
yeah.
And so uh, the Jungle Books are delightful, but they're also problematic in many of their depictions. For example, uh, I believe the Bandar Log was inspired by not just the natives, but very specifically the Bengalis. And
Well, it
so,
rhymes with Bhadra, look.
kind of. So, so, uh, so, so it was a sort of a number of things that I tried to do in that book. When I wrote it was when there were all these conversations going on about neo imperialism, because this was many years ago. This was 2004 5, and is when I started. And so these conversations had started, I think, about you know things in events in Iraq, Afghanistan, and so on. And so it was actually talk of neo imperialism which got me started on that track. But I didn't want to write a tome, I wanted to write a thriller. And so that's what I tried to do. I tried to uh, tell an engaging story, uh, and to have a layer underneath that adventure, that thriller, which was sort of speaking to the politics of the time. And so that's what the Urban Jungle was about. It's set in Delhi at the turn of the millennium, and I have characters whose names are inspired by Kipling. uh, and for a change, in my version of the story, the Bandar Log talk and in some sense talk back. So that's basically the story.
It was very interesting, and I loved how you used the characters in a contemporary way. Yeah. So, moving on to your other work, the partition studies. So again, a topic very close to my heart, being you and I being the children of Bengal partition. So how where in that work, where are you at the moment? And if you can just give us an insight into your work.
Well, so that is basically a very small and completely voluntary effort. It's just three of us, uh, all from Shillong. One is only one of the three of us is a professional historian, which is Dr. Binayak Datta, uh, my classmate from Shillong, and
Mhm.
he's a professor of history who works on partition. He's the editor, and the other two are my colleague Amrita Gupta Singh, who's an art historian, and I'm the third. And we are the two executive editors, and we do this in our free time. We sort of uh, pooled our money a little bit and started it. It was just completely voluntary, and then uh, I think till now we've got a donation of 50,000 rupees, with which we got it going and kept it going. And um, we basically try to, uh, you know, get articles or get papers on partition, but from Northeast India, because uh,
Yeah.
partition is usually thought of as being something which happened mainly in Punjab and secondly in Bengal, but actually Northeast India is also a place which saw partition, and our case was not part per se of the Bengal partition, but of the Assam partition, because Sylhet was a province of was a district of Assam,
Yeah.
and uh, so so basically it's these forgotten aspects that we try to generate thoughtful articles or academic papers about. So
Yeah.
that's really the effort.
Yeah, it's actually quite important that the work you're doing, because like rightly said, it's long forgotten, and for some reason that part of partition, that the west side, east, sorry, the eastern side of the partition stories has not been told as much or narrated as much as the western side of the partition studies have, or partition stories have
Yeah.
found coverage.
There are, if I may just
Yeah.
add a point here, there are differences even within that.
Mm,
For example, uh, the partition in the West is probably more remembered because it was extremely bloody. In the East, that was not the case, at
mhm,
least not immediately. There was bloodshed both before partition in
mhm,
1946 and after. There were riots, riot after riot, but it was not as bloody in 1947 itself as the partition in the West, not nearly as bloody. Things were really bad there. Those trains full of
mm,
murdered people that went back and forth on
yeah.
both sides of the Punjab. But there, even within the partition in the West, uh, there are differences. For example, Jammu also saw enormous
Mm,
bloodshed. But the fact that Jammu is a part of the partition story is usually not remembered.
true. Yeah.
Kashmir is a continuing part of the partition story. We we meaning both India and Pakistan, Indians and Pakistanis have failed to recognize that. But the
Mm,
fact of the matter is that there has been a de facto partition. So we talk about Pakistan occupied Kashmir, they talk about India occupied Kashmir. But the fact is that the territory has been divided, and
yeah.
that happened in 1947 itself. So it suffered partition de facto, even though it's not officially recognized.
True, true. Never thought of that bit again, because it was not so much told. The stories were not out there. So I think many people would be unaware, even if they're aware, maybe not to that great extent, how we are aware of other partition stories. And I think it's what the kind of work which people like you do, which is going to hopefully someday bring all these stories into the mainstream, into people's awareness. I think it's important. I mean, the current uh, scenarios, the current situations, the future situations, we do think about them, talk about them. I think historical scenarios are also important because that informs our present, that informs our future. So
Absolutely.
so much as the current situations are important, I think historical stories have so much significance on how we kind of design our thinking. So
Absolutely. What I've realized as I've gotten deeper into studying history, uh, well, for 20 something years, I was a journalist, so I looked at things in the news uh, within India, but also within the broader region, South Asia. Um, but what I've realized as I've started studying history is the extent to which history is manipulated. Uh,
mm,
and it is manipulated by states, it is manipulated by governments uh, to build stories that they want people to believe. And so that is why some stories are bumped up and some stories are forgotten.
absolutely true. I read somewhere that history is told by the powerful of that time. You know,
Yeah,
so whoever was powerful at that moment, at that time, made the histories. Yeah, that was how history was presented. So what we get handed down in terms of knowledge and in terms of uh, yeah, stories is from the powerful, not from the people who were in the background, or who were the, if you can say, the oppressed and the oppressor. It was always the oppressed who never got their stories out, really. And the more powerful ones had more things to say, and they probably, like you say, like you just told us, is that they probably uh, didn't say history as it was. So it's from their eyes, from their perspective, and yeah. So it's that thing about history which we have to always keep bear in mind. I think when we read history, is who was it at that point of time who wrote that.
it's
So
it's it's a continuing thing. It doesn't stop.
yeah, it doesn't
So
stop.
so
Yeah,
it's the powerful then who wrote stories a certain way or told stories a certain way, but it is also the powerful of today who
yeah,
want to tell their version the way that they benefit from it. So
yes, yes, very
the
true.
powerless remain voiceless
Mhm.
in all situations and in all places at all times.
Yeah, at least thanks to technology, thanks to awareness, thanks to a lot of factors of today, where I think the voiceless can find means to find a voice and tell their stories. But in I just think about times when these these benefits were not there, or these opportunities, and yeah, people didn't have the right tools to voice out. So probably those are the times when they were at high risk for their stories to have totally been forgotten. Yeah. So thankfully, we have the right tools now. Even the people who are in the background, who are not the powerful, can find a means to bring their stories in the forefront.
Uh, it's a mixed blessing. I'll end it in that because that could be a very long conversation. So,
Okay. So while we were talking, I get so engrossed in in the things you talk about in the topics, is that I forgot to show our viewers, while you were on the urban jungle topic, I should have shown this to our viewers. So this is Samrat's Urban Jungle book. This is his first novel. Please, yeah, get them and read it. It's a lovely read. So, Samrat, moving on to your anthology, Insider Outsider, which you've co edited. And again, people who've grown up in, say, Shillong or other parts of the Northeast would know the context of the title of your work and the years long conflict between the two broad groups, mainly the tribals and the non tribals. And like all histories, the history is also of this, the history of this region is also very complex, and it's got different perspectives. And you and I, being belonging to one of the two groups, the outsider group, I think, uh, have been in the meat of this conflict and experienced the dynamics, which were probably not so pleasant firsthand. And of course, it is something which I have also made some noise about and written about in my small way, in my small footprints. So please tell us something about the anthology.
well, uh, you know the story just as well as I do. Uh, but for the benefit of those who don't, to recap briefly, um, after 1947 and partition, um, Northeast India, which, as I mentioned earlier, suffered partition, um, came to be viewed increasingly as a place in which uh, people speaking the Bengali language did not belong. And so, while there was an old Bengali population there in Shillong, because Shillong, after all, was the capital of undivided Assam from a time when Assam included Sylhet. So there was a Sylheti speaking Bengali population there, and it basically became that these people came to be viewed as outsiders as borders were redrawn. So it was the redrawing of borders and the imagining of territories in ethnic terms, which which gradually uh, turned people into outsiders in places where they would earlier have had a sort of a right to belong in a certain sense. And this process continued. Uh, First, it was a religious division between Hindus and Muslims, which split uh, the land between East Pakistan, which later became Bangladesh, and India. Then it was linguistic division between Assamese and Bengalis, which existed before partition but became politically more significant after. And we had the Bongal Khada agitation, where there were riots against Bengali speakers in Assam, uh, from, well, I mean, at scale from 1960 onwards. And that eventually led to the Assam agitation and insurgency in Assam. Uh, Spin-off, or sort of a sort of a side effect, or I don't know, an effect in a way that it inspired other such movements, uh, was what we experienced in Shillong, the former capital of undivided Assam. And that uh, was when the local locally dominant community there, uh, the Khasi Students Union, decided that they uh, wanted to drive out those who were outsiders to the place, and their definition of outsider at the time focused mainly on the Bengali and Nepali language speakers who could be uh, painted as foreigners regardless of their origins. And so that is what we experienced, and that is to some extent what the politics of Northeast India was for decades, and what it continues to be. We now have things like the National Register of Citizens and its twin, the Citizenship Amendment Act, which are trying to, recast the idea of who belongs and who doesn't in ethnic and religious terms. And uh, it's not going to be good for people there. It has destabilized the region, and it threatens to destabilize uh, not just Northeast India, but it may also have impact on Bangladesh, because uh, you cannot have politics of religion in two places which are so closely and historically intertwined. And what happens in one place, it tends to have an effect on the other side of the border as well.
Yeah, well, that is a totally, again, if we go into it, it's going to be quite detailed. But thanks for that overview of the history and how things are currently as well. So things are still continuing, and we do hear of incidences ongoing related to what you just talked about. So, of course, there is no clear resolution. Hopefully, one day we will all,
The
yeah.
the no the thing is, uh, so when I started with the urban jungle, I was grappling with ideas of empire and colonialism and imperialism. In a sense, my work continues to be about that. Uh,
Mm,
and I continue to grapple with those ideas. What I realized by and by is that uh, empire, imperialism, well, I mean, back in the day, you only had kingdoms and empires. Uh, there
mm,
were not many democracies on the face of the earth.
mm,
Uh, so that was the prevalent form of government everywhere. And empires had they had many negatives, but they had one positive. They were not essentially ethnic in character.
mm,
They were not. Uh, so, for example, even when Britain was under the Romans during the Roman Empire, many of the Roman emperors were actually uh, not Roman necessarily. Uh, there were African emperors, North African emperors who became emperor of Rome. There were Syrian emperors who became emperor of Rome, and they took on Roman names, and so they were seen as Romans. The British Empire itself, which ruled us, uh, the royal family is of German origin, and Queen Victoria was basically German. And so essentially, uh, empires were not ethnic or religious or linguistic in the way that nation states are.
Mm,
And by defining territories in very religious or linguistic or ethnic terms later on, we have created problems which split us apart in partition, caused the bloodshed of, caused the deaths of 1 million people, and the displacement of many millions more. Uh, Eventually led to a second civil war and genocide in Bangladesh, in which, according to the Bangladeshi version of events, about 3 million people were killed. Um, so you can count the millions of deaths that have resulted from these ideas of religious and linguistic nationalism. Our story is a small part of that story. We have suffered, my family, your family, we have suffered. Uh, it's essentially a sort of an outcome of the idea that this land belongs only to this group and everybody else is an outsider. This Shillong belongs only to the Khasis, and if you're not Khasi, you don't belong here, right? And so on and so forth. You can say that about any patch of earth,
mm,
and the notion that only these people belong here and everybody else should get out is very dangerous.
true. Um, the laws of nature are so different to our political laws. And like, of course, lands cannot be confined to only one ethnic group. Those kind of divisions don't work. And that's why the conflicts. And until unless we as human beings see that, I think the conflicts will carry on. The
Yeah,
cleansing, the cleansing mindset will carry on, and
yeah.
there's no resolution really until unless we rise above that and then see how nature is intended to be, how we are intended to be. It's not like we go down to these labels as per defined by political boundaries. Yeah, thanks for that. And I hope our viewers, who again, it's a story not well known, and people like Samrat, they are trying to bring it to the mainstream. They are trying to bring it. They are trying to raise more awareness about not only about that region. It is to reflect as a whole how we humans behave and whether those are really they are really helpful. They are clearly not, and that is what I think above what the work Samrat and he and people like him are doing, is that to reflect that kind that uh, that feel is that we need to rise above things which are defined narrowly. So thanks for that. And this is the cover picture of, again, the insider outsider, belonging and unbelonging in Northeast India. Uh, so that ties us next to the next question very nicely. And because you were talking of Shillong, how was it to grow up in the beautiful hill station Shillong, Samrat?
It was lovely. And even though we grew up in troubled times, but my memories are actually pretty much, well, almost all, not quite all, but almost all good memories. And I actually went back to live there after working in different cities across India, Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore. I did go back finally to Shillong and lived there for a couple of years again. And I've I have only good memories, basically, mostly good memories. I remember the trouble. I remember what we used to call the curfew holidays, the annual, the annual bouts of violence, which would inevitably end with curfew being clamped on the town, and weeks or months, or in one case, a whole year of no school, uh, which was 1987.
Mm,
And well, uh, there was always that sense of tension lurking in the background, that sense that you might be attacked if you went out into the street. But strangely enough, my friendships have endured, and endured across divides. And even now, in some sense, Shillong is the place that I always say I am from and that I am happy to go back to. And my dearest friends even today are people that I grew up with across divides. So when I go back to Shillong, my Khasi friends are the ones who are there to welcome me every time, and
Mm.
because most others left, right?
Yeah,
So, so yeah. So I think the personal relationships have transcended all those divisions and barriers. They they
absolutely
they,
true.
they survived the political bitterness.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely true. The ties of the heart, I think they do not go into all those intricacies of politics.
yeah.
Yeah, true for me as well. I mean, I do not have many family over there, but still, if I think of home, it's Shillong. That's what comes to my mind. And Shillong was and will always be my home, my hometown.
Yeah.
Um, I know you as one of those rare people, Samrat, who qualified as an engineer and turned into a journalist. So, what's the story behind it?
That's a very short story. I was a very bad engineer. So, so I figured that I don't want to do this. I don't want to try doing this for the rest of my life, and I'd better find out something I'm a little better at. And since I realized I was terrible before I graduated, so upon finally graduating, because I flunked a few courses and eventually graduated. Uh, but when I did, I went straight into journalism, uh,
So, you walked
which
out of
which
uni and into journalism, into the
uh, well,
right?
I mean, while I was still in college, I had started freelancing already. So I was sort of trying to figure things out, and I already had a foot in the door. And then I answered an ad in the papers and got hired, and passed a test and got hired. And yeah, so started. Uh, it was serendipitous. It happened by chance, but that's a different story.
But who can stop the flow of talent? No one can. Um, so, what was the reaction of your parents?
Well, I still remember that my mother told me that people are saying, people meaning nosy neighbors or pesky relatives are saying ছেলেটা pass হতে পারলো না, the boy couldn't pass his exams. And so when I graduated, I presented the certificate and said, hang it up on the wall, I don't need it. So yeah. And
Oh,
yeah, so after that, I went into journalism and became a journalist. That's the story.
I'm sure the certificate hangs there as a living proof that you've passed your exam. Right. So this is a footage of Shillong, a picture of Shillong taken from Wikipedia. Uh, we wanted Samrat to share his childhood pictures of Shillong, but he, now being in Philippines, couldn't get hold of any of those pictures. So maybe next time when we have Samrat again, we can show some pictures of Shillong. Uh, Let us talk of your new book launch. So I suppose it's going to be in UK next year, Samrat.
Well, I don't know about the launch per se, but the publication, the book is definitely coming out in the UK first, because it's being brought out by a London publisher, which is Hearst. Uh, and I'm looking very much looking forward to it. It's scheduled for release next year in May, and it is a serious work of nonfiction. It's a political history of Northeast India.
Wow, looking forward to that. And yeah, please let us know when the launch is going to take place. If you have any dates, then we are going to share that with our viewers as well.
Most
Really looking
certainly, most
really
certainly.
looking forward to it. And talking of political history of Northeast India, so that must be a humongous task. Knowing, I remember talking to you, and you did say that there was no political history of Northeast India per se as a serious book anywhere. So this was one of its first. It is one of its first kind. So again, so how? Tell us a bit more how you took that work on.
Well, uh, I suppose I should say that I foolishly took the work on, because I took it on, no, not being a historian, I didn't realize the enormity of the task. And so uh, the reason that I realized that it had never been done. Uh, there are histories, political histories of specific states within the Northeast. After all, the region is comprised of officially of 8 states, the eighth being Sikkim. Um, so I realized that the reason it has not been done is because it's too vast. It's a massive, massive topic.
Hmm.
Uh, the difficulty is basically that there are approximately 220 languages which are spoken in the region. And there are, of course, there's every major religious community is there. So many linguistic communities, so many ethnic groups, so many tribes. So the the multiplicity of identities makes it difficult, because every group has its own history and its own versions of history, which further complicates matters. And many of the communities traditionally were uh, they had oral cultures, so there were no written records. So that added to the difficulties of the task. And so basically, to write a credible account and to tie it all together, because, for example, there's nothing I found after a lot of research, a lot of reading, a lot of studying. I could not find, for example, anything which credibly connects, say, for example, the Adi tribe of Arunachal, just off the top of my head as one example,
Hmm.
to, uh, for example, what is now Uttar Pradesh, or
Mhm.
what is now Tamil Nadu, or you know what is now Gujarat. Because after all, these are all modern identities, except Tamil. Tamil has an ancient linguistic identity. But to there's nothing which connects them throughout history, even within the region. There is nothing which connects them that one can find in any record uh, before the advent of colonial rule, really. I mean, you do have myths and legends, but there's nothing that ties the whole region together uh, before colonial rule. You do
Hmm.
find instances of neighboring kingdoms being at war with one another, but the geography then was very different. So basically, you had, even within what is now Meghalaya, for example, look at the diversity. You had uh, a multiplicity of Khasi kingdoms, not just one,
Hmm.
but many small Khasi statelets. You had Garo chieftainships. You had a kingdom in the Jayantia Hills, which whose capital was in Jayantiapur in what is now Bangladesh.
Hmm.
And so the territory was very different, identities were very different, and the connections between one part of what is now Northeast India and another, many of those connections did not really exist, because the connections were often on what is now on the other side of the border. The closer linkages, for example, of the Jaintia kingdom was with what is now Bangladesh, and the closest linkages on in Tripura were with what is now Bangladesh. And so the reconfiguration is something which has gradually happened starting colonial period and continuing after partition.
Wow. Yeah. It's a big responsibility, and I do look forward to your book so that we all can have a read through and know about know an in-depth history of the northeast of India. So good luck with that.
Thank you.
Let's have a look at your book launch cover, your book cover, which is going to be launched in sometime next year. Sorry, please bear with me. There it comes. those were the clips from Samrat's forthcoming book, which is going to be launched next year. Um, so, Samrat, thank you so much. It's indeed a treat to have a friend who is also a writer, and a very good one at that. And I've learned so much from this conversation, and of course, the conversations which we keep having, even out of this. And it's this knowledge about India, apart from where I come from, but is less known of. And I'm sure our viewers have also learned a lot too. Didn't notice how time just whizzed past. An amazing, engrossing 1 hour. Truly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for bringing out the time to have this conversation. And of course, a huge, huge thank you from Triveni Media and our team. And I wish you more success and the very best in your future works. We are all looking forward to your next book.
Thank you so
And
much.
anything else you would like to tell us, just as your parting words?
Well, all I can say as a writer is I hope people read more books. They need not be my books, but as long as they read, it's good for. Uh, it's just helpful to build serious knowledge in a way that probably social media and other more entertaining forms are not.
You know what, Samrat? I had planned to have the hard copies on my desk before this program so I could show all the books signed by you. They're downstairs in my bookcase. And I'm just regretting I didn't do that. But yes, I would ask everyone, please, to reach out to Samrat's book. They are very, very informative about a region which Samrat and I come from, Northeast India, again, not very well known. So with those words, thank you, Samrat, again, and hoping to meet you in person sometime very soon.
Thanks, likewise.
Bye.
Bye. See you.
So everyone, thank you for watching. Please post your comments and questions if you have any. Please follow us on Facebook and YouTube. And my friend and co-host Shibani will bring you more programs on Triveni. Wishing you all from Triveni Media and from me, Shonali, an amazing weekend and a joyful December. Namaskar and bye-bye.